The following special presentation is brought to you by His Word Broadcasting. His Word Broadcasting is located in the Willamette Valley and broadcasts to the local area to bring you God's Word.
Oregon, when it comes to something, Oregon's not exactly the buckle on the Bible Belt. I don't know if you noticed that or not. And when you come to, wanting to mobilize Christians to tangibly stand with Israel, there's a lot of folks out there that call themselves Christians, and they're not sure why others stand with Israel. And, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to give you a glimpse of why God chose Israel and the Jewish people to reveal to you, so that you know without the shadow of a doubt that your faith rests in a God that does what he says he's going to do. Your faith rests in a God that's a promise keeper. He's in the business of doing what he said he's going to do. And if you embark on a study of Israel from Genesis to Revelation, you're not going to emerge out the other end foaming at the mouth as some crazy Zionist, advocate. We hope that maybe you will, but the reality is the absolute worst thing that will happen to you if you embark on studying what the Lord says about Israel and the Jewish people is that you're going to be encouraged that he is a man, he's a God that keeps his promises. He's a God that's in the business of doing what he promised that he's going to do. If he says he's going to restore the ruined cities, and he has. He said he's going to turn deserts into gardens like the Garden of Eden, and he has. He said he's going to bring them from the four corners of the earth and restore Zion, that old men will walk and old women will walk in the streets of Jerusalem with staffs, and children will play in the streets. And when you're there in the old quarter and you read Zechariah 8, you'll see these promises fulfilled and manifested all around you. And so don't miss it when you go. This organization, and I don't want to take more time, but I echo everything that Pastor Denny said about these men in Eugene. Pastor Brian Kelly, thank you for your leadership. They served as our state director, and the baton's been passed to Pastor Denny and Vicki, and we continue to see this organization grow across this entire country. We were founded in 2006 by Pastor John Hagee with 400 leaders, and since then, we've grown to 2.1 million members. We're the largest pro-Israel organization. And there are people just like you and I that believe that Israel is God's line in the sand. You either believe his Bible or you think it's a book of really good suggestions. It's sprinkled with myths and fables to make it fun reading. If you fall into that latter category, this probably is not the organization for you. But if you believe in God's word and you believe that he does what he says he's going to do and he means what he writes in his book, then this is a place for you to lock arms with others that are like-minded and join your voice with others that want to make a difference and want to stand in the gap. Our flagship, and we're going to invite you and challenge you to consider it, is our Washington, D.C. Summit every year. This is going to be our 10th D.C. Summit in July 13th and 14th. And I would say one of the cornerstone foundation principles of what we do is in passing the baton to the Joshua generation to make sure that this vision, that these principles and priorities are not lost in the next generation. And we do that through Christians United for Israel on campus. I don't know if you realize it, but the skyrocketing return that is spreading like a cancerous wildfire across this country is on our universities and college campuses. It's not just acceptable to be anti-Semitic on campus, it's fashionable. And we need to do something about that. And I could do a 90-minute presentation on some of the dynamics right here in Eugene, in this part of Oregon, and it's not pleasant. So I say that because the first year in DC in 2006, we were overwhelmed. We were braced for 1,000 people. We knew that we'd have about 500 people. We thought it was a step of faith to hope and pray for 1,000 people, and 3,600 people showed up. And before you knew it, there are TV trucks with their big satellite dishes and cameras and microphones everywhere, and we thought that we had arrived and we were on the map, and we realized that the media is not out to cast Christians in a very favorable light. They are out to cast you as an idiotic caricature of yourself. And so the next year, when we had 4,500 people show up, we had rules for the journalists. And they had places they could be and places that they couldn't be, and things they could do and things they couldn't. And if they're going to be wandering out in the halls, they needed a staff and they needed ID. And a lot of them colored outside the lines and bent the rules. And that's when I encountered one of the few people that I've ever, engaged that had a number tattooed on their left forearm. She was being interviewed by a journalist that was looking for a juicy morsel. And with all the near insulting, definitely sarcastic condensation that you could put in voice inflection, she said, "How does it make you feel to know that after all you survived and endured, you do realize that with the president of Iran on the rise, that your kids and grandkids are probably going to face the same thing?" And she didn't miss a beat. I have told this story more times than I can count. She didn't miss a beat. She said, "It's not the same thing. We were alone that time, and we're not alone this time." Everything tonight is about, everything this organization is about distills down to that. And when you hear Irving's story, you're going to hear a history account, a firsthand witness testimony of what happened in the 30s and the 40s that people turned a blind eye to. But you're also listening to a 5-alarm wake-up call that our country and even the church keeps hitting the snooze button on. And so don't just let this be a history lesson. Let it be a warning cry and a wake-up call to you. Because what happened in the 30s and 40s aren't just thinking about, aren't just trying to, are actually happening today. And it's coming to a neighborhood near us very soon if we're not careful. We love, as Christians, to aspire and fantasize that we would have the courage and integrity of Casper ten Boom if we heard a knock on the door at 2 a.m., that we'd open it up and we'd bring in a Jewish family and we'd risk the lives of our entire family to save those people. You know why Casper ten Boom is so famous? Because he was exceptional. He wasn't the rule. Most Christians, if they heard a knock on the door, they turned off the porch light, or they closed the curtains, or they pretended that they weren't home. That's the rule. We stand at an ominously similar fork in the road today. And I'm challenging you that when you hear Irving's story today, you are listening to a knock on the door, And by the end of the evening, you can decide if you want to turn off the porch light, draw the curtains, or open the door and take a stand. Speak up and stand up, lock your arms with others that are like-minded, join your voice with others, so that history doesn't repeat itself again on our watch. Amen? Please welcome who is soon to be one of your closest friends and most precious champions and heroes. He certainly is one of mine and Denny's and Vicky's. Author, Holocaust survivor, lecturer, and just an all-around great guy that could be a stand-up comedian if you wanted to be. Mr. Irving Roth.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So what I would like to do tonight is take you on a journey through my life. Because my life, in the life of the Jewish people, the existence of the Jewish people of today, and the desire on the part of millions of people then and now to annihilate them, was there then, and unfortunately is there now. So I want to take you on a journey through my life, because it too will show you the intersection between the global nature of this word called Holocaust, the global nature of all the words we know about gas chambers, and the personal struggles and survival. What you'll understand, I hope, is the intersection of the global, the numbers, the people, and the individual. me. I was born in 1929 in a country that was a democracy, Czechoslovakia. Finally, in the middle of Europe, 140 years after the French Revolution declaring liberty, equality, and fraternity, but for the first time, by the end of the 19th century, the Jews became citizens of almost all of Europe. They were integrated into society, participated in every aspect of life of every country in Europe, except Romania. What happened? What happened? How can the most cultured country, the most sophisticated people, elect a Nazi government whose part of the agenda and part of the words that they used and part of the speeches they gave is the annihilation of the Jews? How is it possible that 37% of the people of Germany elected this government? What transformed them from God-fearing, law-abiding, moral, ethical people to murderers? How did this happen? How did these people get transformed? As I say, make up lies. And slowly, step by step, transform your next door neighbor to a pariah. It's a very simple process. It's a step-by-step process. Keep bombarding. Keep educating evil. And unfortunately, it catches on. And so here I am, born in 1929. I live in a country which is democracy, in the center of Europe. I live in a city of 7,000 people. 1/3 of the population is Jewish. The other 2/3 are made up of primarily Catholics, a few Protestants, Russian Orthodox, Gypsies, living, working together. I go to public school. At age 6, I begin school. The kids in my school are Catholics and Protestants and Russian Orthodox. In fact, one of the Russian Orthodox girls was the prettiest in her whole class. And being somewhat bashful, it took me 3 months to begin to speak to her. But I did. By the end of the first year, I carried her books. I live in a city, I live in a house, a home, with my father and mother, my older brother, and my grandparents. Very early in my life, I realized that grandparents are much easier to manipulate than parents. I figured out that if my father says no, I don't argue. I go over to my grandfather, tell him how much I love him. It didn't work so well. I also played soccer. I was a fantastic soccer player. A defensive fullback. I played on a team with Catholics and Protestants and Russian Orthodox and Gypsies. Life was beautiful. My father and grandfather had a business, a lumber business. You're familiar with that thing called lumber business, I hear. He produced railroad ties by the tens of thousands. It was a nice city. A modern city. It was not a city where all the streets were full of mud. No, we had paved roads and sidewalks and a tennis court and a soccer stadium and a place to swim in the summertime, a beach, and even ice skating rink in the wintertime, and stores, and 2 railroad stations, one for freight and one for passengers. And there were Jewish doctors and there were non-Jewish doctors, Jewish attorneys and non-Jewish attorneys. living, working together. In 1936, when the Olympics were taking place in Berlin, I knew about the Olympics because by and large, I was 7 years old. And what kid doesn't know about Olympics? I did know, however, that in the 1936 Olympics, Jews were no longer permitted to participate because the Olympics took place in the capital of Germany, in Berlin, and Jews were not allowed to participate. So you can imagine the world, the democratic Olympians would have said, we're not going. We're not going because it's not equal. After all, this is what sports is all about. It's about ability to play, not about the color of your skin or the name of your religion. That would have been the response which one would expect. That expectation was not met. Every country participated, including ours. I didn't really know that. And as time goes on, Germany decides to expand. That's part A. Part B of Germany's idea is to purify Germany of any undesirables, particularly Jews. So by 1938, there's a conference in Munich, attended by the Prime Minister of England, Prime Minister of France, El Duce, Mussolini, and Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler gives the proposition that he wants a narrow slice of Czechoslovakia, Sudetenland. And if the powers stop him, World War II will begin. And so immediately they discuss this issue, and England, the major power of Europe, France, another major power, acquiesced to this. No one bothered asking the president of Czechoslovakia what he thought. No one bothered to understand that if you take the border of a country where all the defenses are established, you're gone. And so they signed away the first step. Oh, of course, Adolf Hitler signed a piece of paper. He has absolutely no intention of doing anything more, just this little sliver, because some Germans live there, and therefore it rightfully belongs to Germany. He signed the paper, and the paper was waved by the Prime Minister of England when he arrived in Heathrow Airport. We have achieved peace in our time. 6 months later, the German army totally dismembered Czechoslovakia, occupied part of it, became part of Germany. The area I lived became a new country, a new fascist, anti-Semitic country called Slovakia. Of course, I'm 10 years old. Do I really appreciate the global nature of this thing? Of course not. But I know what's happening to me. I go out one day in the summer of 1939 to meet my friends in the park, and I can't go in because there is a sign and a policeman. Jews and dogs are not allowed to enter. And thus begins the step-by-step process of isolation, separation, oppression. Within a matter of weeks, I can't go out at night because I'm a Jew. I have to wear a yellow star because I'm a Jew. I have to take my warm winter jacket and deliver it to the police department because it's made of fur. And that's a luxury. My mother has to deliver her gold earrings to the police department because that too is a luxury, and Jews are not allowed to have any. Our radio must be delivered to the police department. Step by step. The law limits what a Jew can do, what can have. By the spring of 1940, one day I'm walking home with my friend. You remember her, right? And she turns to me, she says, "We can't walk together anymore." I say, "Why?" "In fact, we can't talk and we can't walk together and we can't do homework together because my father told me not to be so friendly with a Jew because being friends with Jews is a bad idea. It will affect you socially, economically, and politically in every other way." And so my friends turn away from me. By September of 1940, first day of school, I get there and I want to go through the gate and the principal looks at me and says, "You can't go in because you're a Jew." Every single Jewish kid at every level of schooling, from kindergarten through graduate school, was thrown out of school. Every single Jew. In fact, every single Jewish teacher was fired on that day. And so I go home in the afternoon. I decide, since I didn't go to school, I still will go in the afternoon and meet my friends and play soccer. I get to the field and the coach looks at me and says, "Don't put on your soccer shoes because you no longer are on the team. We don't want any Jews on our team." My friends, that wasn't even the law. But the hatred, prejudice penetrated the soul, the mind, and the heart of the non-Jewish population. Very soon, Jewish attorneys can no longer practice law. And one day we hear a rumor. Jews will no longer be allowed to own a business. And so my father is in a panic. What is he going to do? How are we going to live? And so he comes up with this brilliant idea. Being has been in business, has social connections, political connections, economic connections. One of his very best friends, a Roman Catholic man, Albert. My father calls Albert and tells him, "Albert, please, do me a favor. Take over my business. You're a friend. You're not going to take it away from me. We'll just change the name. I'll continue running it. And as a token of my appreciation, I will give you $1,000 a month. All I want to do is use your name." But Albert, being a friend of decades, says, "Sure, what's the problem? Where do I sign?" Jews lose their businesses, not my father. My father is running the lumber business. Thousands, tens of thousands of railroad ties are shipped all over Europe, including England. And one day Albert comes to see my father and says, "Joe, how is business?" "Great," says my father. He says, "I'm glad to hear that because I want half the profits." Another 3 months go by and walks into the office and tells my father, "Joe, I like the way you're running my business. I'm not going to fire you. You can continue managing it and running it as an employee. But the business is mine." Betrayal by friends. And so the world goes on. Germany is expanding. By the middle of 1941, Germany has expanded to the point where it controls most of Europe. And with it, all the anti-Semitic laws. In Belgium, in France, in Slovakia, in Poland, in Germany. Not the Soviet Union, because they have a pact, a non-aggression pact between the Soviet Union and Germany. But in June of 1941, Germany attacks the Soviet Union and penetrates deep into the Soviet Union within weeks. It's 80 miles from Moscow. But with it also comes another group of men, not fighting soldiers. As the German army advances, behind it is a group of people called members of the Einsatzgruppen, special units, whose job it is not to fight the war, it's simply to clean up. And what they meant by it, These people were older men whose job it was to learn how to fire a machine gun, walk into towns and cities and villages, march the Jews out into the ravine, into ditches, machine gun them. These psychopaths. No, my friends, they were not psychopaths, they were ordinary men. Tens of thousands of ordinary Germans volunteered to learn how to fire a machine gun, put on a uniform, and murder Jews en masse. And I don't mean men, I mean men, women, and children, and babies. On a massive scale. Day after day, week after week. It's too slow. The process is taking too much time. And so they convened a conference called the Wannsee Conference. It was in Wannsee. Wannsee happens to be outside of Berlin, a suburb. Who were these people who were convened there? Well, scientists and engineers and chemists and military personnel and transportation experts. And their single agenda point was figure out how to get rid of every single Jew in Europe quickly and cheaply. 1/3 of the group had PhDs. And in 90 minutes, they figured out exactly how to do that. Well, about death camps. Bring the Jews from all over Europe to these death camps. There'll be a gas chamber. We'll somehow manage to get them in there. We'll murder them. On top of it, or next to it, we will build crematory ovens. Use Jewish men to take the bodies and put them into the ovens. And this way, cheaply, we can get rid of all the Jews. But it's the summer of 42, this was in operation. And Slovakia, being a truly fascist state, a truly state that really hates every single Jew, my neighbors, my friends, made a deal with Germany. We'll ship the Jews to you via railroad cars. You get rid of them, and we will pay you for every single Jew 500 crowns, equivalent to about $125 per Jew. And so in the middle of the night, there's a knock on every Jewish home in my town. 1,800 out of the 2,000 Jews are picked up, jammed into the synagogue, which has no bathroom, which has no running water, and the Jews are locked up in there for a day and a half. Day and a half later, marched out into cattle cars, and they're gone. My family was spared. We got an exemption. A few months go by, and one morning, as I'm walking out of synagogue with my grandfather, he's arrested. Simultaneously, my grandmother is arrested at home. We managed to get him out. But we know we cannot stay there, because any moment, all the Roths will be gone. And so we decide to escape to a place called Hungary. Now, Hungary was part of the Nazi Empire, the Axis powers. But their idea what to do with the Jews at the moment was somewhat different. They felt that since they're fighting a war against the Soviet Union, they need manpower. So why not use the Jews as the slave labor force necessary to build bridges, fix roads, hunt for mines so the tanks don't get blown up, and let the families stay home. And let them work hard and ship food to their men, so the meager food that we give them will be supplemented and they'll be in good health. After the war is over, we'll take care of it. So momentarily, though, Hungary is a safe haven for the Jews. We managed to get there. 1942, 1943, the Jews from every part of Europe shipped to Auschwitz, Majdanek, Treblinka, to the 6 death camps, not from Hungary. I'm living in a small village in Hungary with my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunt, my brother. My parents are in Budapest because my father needs a job. And there are not too many jobs available in a village of 250 people and about 500 cows. And so he's off in Budapest, and meanwhile, things are looking good. The American army has been at war now. More than 2 years. They've occupied all of Italy. They're bombing Germany day and night. The Soviet Union has pushed back the German army into Poland, and the war is going to be over soon, and I am alive, living in my aunt's house. Wonderful. Why? Because A, she was a great cook. B, my father and mother are in Budapest. Therefore, the amount of supervision is limited. And I'm waiting for the war to end. But in the spring of 1944, Germany, together with the Hungarian Nazis, decide we're not going to wait until after the war. What we're going to do is get rid of the Jews, because the only place in all of Europe there is a large number of Jews is in Hungary. And we will achieve the final solution to the Jewish question, meaning there won't be a single Jew alive in Europe. In 53 days, 437,000 Jews are picked up from their homes, 2 cattle cars, to Auschwitz, the largest of the death camps. I am in one of those cattle cars with my grandfather, grandmother, brother. The train stops after 3 days. It's nighttime. I jump off the train. I look around and see guards screaming, "Heraus! Mach schnell! Get out quickly. Take nothing with you." Form lines. In the distance, chimneys with flames. I'm 14 years old. My parents are someplace in Budapest. I have no idea what's happening to them. I'm scared. But suddenly I realize that I'm separated from my grandfather, my grandmother, my aunt. My brother and I marched one way. They're marched into those buildings with the flames and chimneys and murdered. Auschwitz had the capability of murdering and disposing of 10,000 human beings a day. So when you speak of mass murder, that's why 437,000 people that were brought to Auschwitz in 53 days, 90% of them were ashes. I was assigned to work. I was assigned to work with horses, these big Belgian work horses, drain swamps and plow fields. I lived and grew up in a city. I didn't know what plowing fields meant. I also didn't know much more about a horse than the fact that a horse has a head and a tail and a body. But how that body and how that head and tail gets hooked up to a plow to till the soil was a mystery. I figured it out after a while, and in fact I described that particular process in my memoir. Life was difficult in Auschwitz because there was very little food. Black coffee for breakfast, soup at noon, and a piece of bread at night. Long hours. By 6 o'clock in the morning, nothing like that. I finished cleaning the horses and feeding them. I was already behind a plow at 6 o'clock in the morning, and not finished till 7, 8 o'clock at night during the summertime. Some nights we would come back, and rather than going into our building, wash up, get some food, go to sleep, because soon you have to get up. We're taken to take a shower. Now you imagine, worked all day in the field, in a swamp. It was wonderful to do that. But there was unfortunately a small little detail, and that's the fact. Some nights, they came back, we'd go to the showers under guard. You get undressed, take a piece of soap, and as you're walking into the shower, there is a doctor in uniform, look at you naked and determine if you should continue to live. By a quick look, life and death is decided. I survived. The Russian army is getting closer to Auschwitz. It's January of 1945, and suddenly one morning we're marching in the wrong direction, marching away from the Russian army on a death march. You march or you die. One bullet is all it takes. My brother keeps telling me, keep marching. I say, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm cold. He says, say a prayer. He knew the Psalms by heart. And so on the death march, I'm repeating words after my brother. He encourages me, keep marching. This will not last forever. We get to Buchenwald, another camp where the food is much more limited, only a boiled potato or a bowl of soup every second or third day. People die of hunger. One day my brother is taken away. I'm alone. I'm trying to survive. The war's coming to an end. It's April of 1945, and one morning they start the death marches again. I keep hiding. I'm hiding under a building on the 10th of April of 1945, and the guard comes with a dog, finds me out to the gate. On both sides, guards ready to march us out. While we're standing, their siren goes off, and there's an air raid. There are airplanes overhead, American airplanes. There is bombing of Weimar and other cities around Buchenwald, and of course, they don't want to be outside. They lock the doors, put the electricity into the fence, and wait. A miracle, my friends. The air raid lasted all day long, and I survived another day. By next morning, 11 o'clock, the guards disappeared, and 2 American soldiers walked into my barracks at 3 p.m. on April 11th, 1945. My friends, I saw the Messiah. There are 2 of them. One was black and one was white. So that may give you a hint. I wasn't going to be killed. Nobody wanted to kill me anymore. Suddenly I'm a person. I'm being fed. The kids were taken out of the camp into a beautiful building, and 4 kids assigned to each room with beds and mattresses and everything wonderful, and food, of course, and chocolate. And every one of us got a carton of Camel cigarettes. You get the picture. 4 kids, 15 years old, each one with a carton of cigarettes. No supervision. There I am, sitting on my bed, puffing away like some big-time operator. First cigarette, second cigarette. I'm about to take a third cigarette, and I don't feel so good. My tongue is burning. My lips are bitter. I am dizzy. I'm sweating, and I'm cold, and I'm dying. Survived Auschwitz, survived Buchenwald. I'm going to die. I didn't. 2 hours later, it all went away, so I never smoked again in my life. I traded my cigarettes for chocolate. So I'm alone in Buchenwald. The war is over. Any place you want to go, the army will take you. And I decide to go back to the village where I was taken. And through a long process, I get to the village. The first person I see, I ask him, anybody in the Roth family survive? Did they come here? He says, yeah. I say, where? I run over, I open up the door, and there's my mother. I say, hi, Mom. My mother fainted out of sheer joy. My parents survived in Budapest. They survived because someone was willing to help. Before the Jews of Budapest are being shot on the street, dumped into the Danube or on a death march or into railroad cars, my father gets very sick. He goes into a coma. He has a contagious disease called typhus. Everybody says he's going to die. In fact, the doctor tells my mother, pray that he die quickly, because even if his heart keeps pumping, he'll never come out of the coma. He'll be a vegetable. A night nurse, a Seventh-day Adventist Christian woman, tells my mother, don't believe everything they say. pray that he survive. And night after night after night, this wonderful lady is sitting by my father's bedside talking to him. Of course, he's in a coma. But she doesn't give up. And one night, she looks at him and she's talking to him, and suddenly she hears a voice. Clearly as can be, how long have I been asleep? My father comes to, out of a coma. He's fine. But the Jews of Budapest are being shot on the street, and this wonderful lady gives my parents a place to hide in her one-bedroom apartment where she lives with her daughter, who is married and has a husband who is out on the front line fighting the Russians, a Nazi soldier, and a daughter. My parents get there. They hide there. Police come and look for Jews. They don't find them. One night there's a knock on the door. Into the hiding place they go. And who comes in? But the husband comes home for 3 days. One-bedroom apartment, 2 extra people. You got to do something. He'll know. And so the wife decides to tell him the following story. We have some distant relatives living with us. No, you never met them. They weren't invited to the wedding. We didn't talk to them in those days. But you mustn't tell anybody, because if you do, anybody finds out, the police will come, turn the house upside down, they'll find them and shoot them in the courtyard. And if you want to go to bed with me tonight, you're going to keep your big mouth shut. My parents survived. He knew I was good. Because somebody was willing to help. In Jerusalem, there are 23,000 trees in a place called Yad Vashem. Next time you're there, go there and see. You'll see the names. Polish names and Hungarian names and Dutch names. People who stood up. As you heard, some said, no. We honor those people. But unfortunately, the war is over, which is wonderful, but unfortunately, the Jews have no place to go. They're stateless. They're in camps in Germany, in Italy, in displaced person camp, because no one wants them. They can't go back home. They're liable to be shot. In fact, hundreds of people in Poland were shot after the war. Certainly in Russia. Somebody's living in their home, somebody took over their business. They don't want them back. Jews want to go to their own homeland. After 2,000 years, they've been praying every single day 3 times the return to Jerusalem. And in 1947, through some crazy manipulation, the UN votes to partition Palestine to 2 states. A Jewish state where the Jews live, and an Arab state where the Arabs live. Perfectly reasonable. The day they declare a state in May of 1948, 6 Arab armies attack Israel. To push them into the sea, to annihilate them. If that were the end, the Jews survived. But the wars continue. The murder of Jews continues, whether it's in pizza parlors, in hotel lobbies, any place and every place. War after war, they managed to survive. This summer, hundreds, thousands of rockets are being fired from Gaza into populated areas of Israel. Ashdod, Rehovot, you name it. Close to the airport in Tel Aviv, 3 Jewish young men are abducted and murdered. Israel must do something. They retaliate. The chutzpah, the nerve of the Jews to fight back. Who ever heard of such nonsense? What right do they have to defend their people? It's a war crime for Israel to defend its people. Of course, a few weeks ago, or less than a few weeks ago, a Jordanian fighter pilot was captured by ISIS. And he was murdered by burning him alive. And so rightfully so, the Jordanian government says, we're going to retaliate. 7,000 people so far have been killed by the Jordanians, and we hail them as heroes. Just read the paper. Israel retaliates, and they're war criminals. Don't you find that kind of peculiar? This is anti-Semitism at its worst. And the fact that the world media buys into it. Would you believe it? There wasn't one single picture during the whole 50-day period in any paper in America, a single solitary Hamas soldier. They were on the scene. There wasn't a single rocket fired. I don't know how magically it arrives in 10,000 rockets arrive in Israel. They built tunnels instead of building schools and hospitals for the people of Gaza. They built tunnels to get under the fence, come up on the other side and murder children. That's legitimate, you see. But the defense of Israel defense is not. In fact, Abu Mazen, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has now lodged a formal complaint with the International Criminal Court accusing Israel of war crimes. And no one objects. Through lies, propaganda, distortion, the demonization of the Jew is taking place today. Exactly the same way as the 1940s. And so, my friends, there's an existential threat to the state of Israel. 6 million Jews are in danger. Iran is planning to build, although they deny it, nuclear weapons. What is Iran saying about Israel? We will destroy them. In fact, a few years ago at the UN, the president of Iran stood at the rostrum at the UN in Manhattan and told the delegates from all the nations that they will destroy Israel. There won't be a single Jew left. And the delegates applauded. It's beyond anti-Semitism. But my friends, I don't totally despair. Because there are people in this world who do care. When I had the privilege of starting to work with CUFI, there were about 500,000 members. 2.1 million people in America. 2.1 million Christians in America say, no, enough with the lies. We will teach our children. We'll fight this evil. And to quote Pastor Hagee, when CUFI reached 1 million, I was at a particular event that he was giving a talk. He says, we have now reached 1 million. Now our job is only to get the other 49 million to join us. And so what do I ask of you? Join. Become part. Tell your friends, your relatives, your neighbors. Join CUFI so we can swell the ranks. So America will be there. We are a superpower. We have the power. Tell our representatives, tell our president, tell our administrations, don't betray Israel again. And tell them, tell them in Washington in July, you want to stay in this job? Since you can't do anything else because you don't own anything else. You better Do what is right. Otherwise, you'll be looking for a job. The other thing I ask you, my friends, is tell your children. Tell your grandchildren. Because they'll be off to college. They'll be inundated with the Muslim propaganda because they're spending millions of dollars in college campuses, forming organizations whose singular function is to demonize the Jews. They have things called apartheid weeks, where they reenact, as if that were true, that IDF is murdering. Every lie you can conceive of is there. We must tell our children, we must tell our grandchildren, we must tell the college students, do not fall into the trap. And that is why CUFI on college campus is critical. Why? Because in 20 years from now, those young men and women who are in college today will be running the country. That will be their agenda. And unless they understand the lies, the propaganda, the demonization, they won't give a damn. And that, I beg you, I ask you, prevent. And you can. Sign up. Know everything what's going on. Know that the lies that BBC is spewing on a daily basis and other organizations must come to an end. Let's become educated. Let's tell our children. Let's tell the world. We are behind Israel. Thank you very much.
Really, thank you to Crossfire Ministries. Thank you to One Hope and Pastor Steve. Again, to Pastor Denny and Vicki, just for their incredible, tireless leadership. Pastor Jeff, he's already headed back to Cottage Grove. And Pastor Brian and Vicki, Kelly, thank you very much for just being with us tonight and all that you've done to plow the field. It's gonna sound like I'm challenging you in a moment, but I'm not. I'm actually encouraging you. Because there are folks in this audience, you're thinking, I'm here in the Eugene, Springfield area, what can I do? These things are daunting, these things are extremely intimidating and complex as far as the political ramifications go. And I want to tell you that it's that underestimation, that understating the significance of your single voice is the single one most valuable asset that the enemies of Israel have. How many people did it take for abortion to become legal? One. You know why it only took one person? Because millions of people, just like you and I, thought that millions of other people would realize how horrible it was, so they would do something about it so I don't have to. They would speak up so I don't have to. Same could be said for prayer in school. Same had been said since 1998 about a resolution that has sat on the desk of our elected officials since then, saying that if you want to receive foreign aid from the United States, you have to protect your religious minorities, including Christians. Sounds like a no-brainer to me, pretty easy. Not one elected official had the backbone to bring it to the congressional floor to even discuss it and bring it to a vote. In 2013, when we went to D.C., we brought it to the attention of all of our elected officials. By the way, over 90% of your elected officials meet with us when we go to D.C. because they realize we're a force to be reckoned with. And so we decided to make that a talking point, to bring it to their attention. Where do you stand on H.R. 653? And they didn't even know it was in the stack on their desk. So we decided to roll up our sleeves and bring it to their attention. We brought it to the attention of all of the elected officials that we met with in D.C. Then we made it an action alert to our then 1.2 million members and asked them to forward it out to all their friends and all their family, and asked them to forward it out to all their friends and all their family to contact their elected official. It takes 3 minutes to send an email, people. And when they get that email, they think that that one email represents 1,000 people, but 999 of them didn't bother to take 3 minutes to send it. That's the significance that it has as long as you don't become white noise sending them 10 a day. So we forwarded it out. 7 weeks after that action alert went out, several congressional members brought that resolution to the floor And this is the important part that you need to know. When we went to D.C. in July, I put on my iPhone an app called GovTrack. And it is remarkably reliable in its accuracy of forecasting what's going to happen. If a candidate's going to be elected or if a piece of resolution or legislation's going to pass. That resolution, GovTrack gave it a 4% chance of ever being brought to the floor, a 0% chance of passing if it was ever brought to the floor. 7 weeks after we sent out that action alert, it was brought to the floor, and it passed 412 to 22. Because people like you and me didn't leave it for other people to do. Do not underestimate the significance of your single voice. But if a phone call or an email represents 1,000 people, and a postcard in your own writing represents about 10,000 people, when you physically show up in their DC office, it's off the Richter scale. There are people in this audience tonight that have the financial means and the flexibility of schedule to be able to join us in DC. Truth is our weapon, but knowledge is our ammunition. You need to load up on it. It's not good enough to know in your heart that Israel's not an apartheid state. Articulate to me why it's not an apartheid state. 100 people, 99 of them can't even define apartheid. And it's an abominable insult to the black South Africans that endured apartheid to have it compared with Israel. So you need to load up on that ammunition because truth is our weapon. And we want to see Oregon represented in a big way in Washington, D.C. this year. This is on our watch. Let's not leave this for other people to do. Amen. Let's lock our arms together and join our voice together. God bless you. Traveling mercies to you.
Thank you for watching this special presentation brought to you by His Word Broadcasting. To watch this and other programs, visit us online at hiswordbroadcasting.org.